In August of 2018, the Watts family became the center of a national nightmare. Shanann Watts, 15 weeks pregnant, and her daughters, Bella and Celeste, vanished from their Colorado home. Days later, they were found dead. Chris Watts first appeared as a worried husband, then as a suspect, then as a man who confessed. He pled guilty in November 2018, avoiding a full public trial. But in February 2019, from inside prison, he offered a longer, more detailed confession, one that many people accepted as the final, complete truth. Today, we're going to slow that down. Not to debate what happened, but to examine how belief settles and why horrific detail can feel the same as certainty. Do you believe his final prison confession?
Before we get into this, I want to be very clear about what this video is and what it isn't. This is not about declaring the final prison confession of Chris Watts true or false. It's about something more specific. It's about why so many people accepted it as definite. Because by the time the confession happened, the public had already moved through a powerful emotional sequence. Fear, suspicion, relief, horror. And when you understand that sequence, you understand why the final version felt settled for so many people. But feeling settled and being settled are not always the same thing. So let's walk through this carefully. When a pregnant woman and her 2 small children go missing, the public response is immediate, protective, hopeful, terrified. People weren't just watching a news story. They were emotionally invested. And emotional investment creates a psychological need for closure. That need doesn't go away. It builds.
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. I just want them back.
When this interview aired, something felt off. Chris is saying urgent words. He's asking for them to come home. But his posture is closed, contained, self-holding, and rocking back and forth, self-soothing behaviors. At this point, most people couldn't articulate why it bothered him. They just felt it. That's intuition without language. Our intuition picks it up as something just feels off.
This is where it shifted. He's watching himself on the neighbor's security footage, hands on his head, still almost frozen. Again, this posture doesn't prove anything, but culturally we have seen it before in arrest footage and police body cam videos and moments of exposure. So the brain doesn't just see stress, it pattern matches. And for many viewers, suspicion solidified there. Tension was building, and tension demands resolution. And then this. In his first confession, the audio is difficult to hear, but the structure of what he says is clear. He tells investigators, she heard them, she heard my kids, and then I freaked out. Up until that moment, there had been discomfort without explanation. Now there was explanation, and the brain stabilizes around explanation. Not because it has been verified, but because it reduces uncertainty. Relief feels like truth. That distinction matters. When Chris pled guilty, the case closed legally. But there was no extended public trial unpacking forensic detail in front of the public.
No prolonged cross-examination, no structural courtroom narrative walking through everything step by step. That left space. And when cognitive space exists, the mind wants it filled. And then there's his final prison confession.
Months later, in a prison interview, Watts confessed to unaliving the girls at the oil site. As shocking as this was, it provided closure.
And this is where many people felt the narrative finally lock into place. Why? Because it had specificity. It had detail. It had horror. It had finality. And one of the most powerful psychological anchors was this thought. Why would someone make up something that horrific? Why would someone make up something that makes him look even worse, if possible, than he looked when he pled guilty? That reasoning feels strong. Horrific detail feels authentic. Specific detail feels credible. And when someone appears to have nothing obvious to gain, people assume truthfulness. That's a very human reaction. But here's a question we don't always stop to examine. Is no one would make that up actually a reliable test for truth? Feeling too horrific to fabricate, that's where we move from emotional reasoning to possibility analysis. Let me be clear. This is not an accusation. It is not a declaration of fabrication. It is an examination of logic. In high-profile cases, confessions do not exist in isolation. They exist inside public narratives, ongoing discussion, and evolving interpretation. Possible factors that can shape or influence a later confession in situations like this may include a desire to control the final version of events, a desire to remove earlier blame shifting, a desire to end speculation permanently with detail, the human tendency to consolidate stories over time through repeated retelling, the fact that memory is reconstructive, not static, awareness, direct or indirect, of public narratives circulating outside of prison walls. But none of these possibilities prove influence, really. But they do show that the reasoning no one would invent something that horrific is not airtight. Horror can increase perceived authenticity, but it can also increase narrative finality. And narrative finality is psychologically powerful. By the time the final confession surfaced, the public had already grieved, processed shock, needed closure. So when a detailed, horrifying, complete version appeared, many people accepted it. Not necessarily because they had independently verified every element, but because it completed the emotional arc. Completion feels like truth. But completion is a psychological experience, not a forensic one. Challenging reasoning is not the same as denying reality. It is about examining how certainty forms. In cases this emotional, certainty stabilizes quickly. But stability and scrutiny are not the same thing. This isn't about rewriting what happened. It is about understanding how belief becomes settled. Because once you see how it feels final can shape perception, you start asking better questions. And better questions are never a bad thing. If you're here because you're interested in looking beneath the surface, you're in the right place. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe if you want more of this. See you next time.